to Debrief. Saudi Arabia is featured pretty heavily in the Trump administration so far. If you remember, Riyadh was the first stop in the president's first trip abroad. And now the kingdom itself is undergoing a major reshuffling. To explain, we'll rewind back to 1932. King Abdulaziz ibn Saud established the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and presided over it for 21 years. 5 other kings held the throne over the next 6 decades until 2015, when King Salman ascended to the throne. Until today, 57-year-old Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef was next in line. He's been removed from his role as Interior Minister and as point man with Washington, stripped of his title and his place in the line of succession. In his place comes the king's son, 31-year-old Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's already largely been calling the shots in foreign policy and has led Saudi Arabia's operation in Yemen as defense minister. He's also spearheading what the kingdom has called Vision 2030, outlining a new future for the country. Here with me, Dr. Brandon Friedman, a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center for Mideast Studies. Brandon, great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Nurit.
So let's look big picture for a moment. We're talking about the now Crown Prince, who has taken a lead in foreign policy, helped spearhead what we see in Yemen, helped spearhead this vision for the future for 2030. What does this say to you about the direction the kingdom is taking?
I think the kingdom's ready for change, or at least Mohammed bin Salman is. And I think when you look at the population, where it's somewhere near 2/3 of it under 35, I think that the change from a generation that was older, that had ruled the kingdom for almost 50 years, to someone who's in their 30s and can relate to this young population, I think is perhaps a reason for some optimism. Now, we're in the Middle East, so you always have to be pessimistic at the same time. And so Mohammed bin Salman assumes the reins at a very important moment in Saudi history. They're running out of oil money. They're facing huge foreign policy challenges with the confrontation with Iran and the threat from within, which is the Islamic State. So, you know, there's no shortage of challenges facing Mohammed bin Salman, but he's energetic. And that's something new in the Saudi leadership. You have someone who wants to take the reins. He seems to want the challenge. And he seems to have appointed a new generation of technocrats who are ready to do the job. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, you know, a lot of critics of Saudi Arabia have said over the years that they don't change fast enough. And now that all this change is coming with Mohammed bin Salman since January 2015, because he's really been the chief executive there, I think the criticism is he's reckless. And so the Saudis really can't win. They've been going too slowly for decades, and now they sort of ramp up and try to go fast, and everyone's like, hold on a second. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Let's bring into the conversation also from Washington, Daniel Surwer is a scholar at the Middle East Institute and academic director for Johns Hopkins Conflict Management Program. Thanks very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So you may have heard Brandon just now, maybe just answered it, but what is your take on why now? Why this abrupt shift and a sort of new direction for leadership is happening right now in the kingdom?
Well, in an absolute monarchy, all it takes is a decision by one person. And that decision is very clear now and has been actually clear for some time. He wants to entrust the kingdom to his son. Why now? Well, the pressure on oil prices is one of the things that's driving certainly Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia. But there's also the pressure from Iran, which is felt very strongly there. And the new Crown Prince is a real hawk on the subject of Iran. He's made it clear that he doesn't want to be talking to Iran. He wants to be countering Iran in Syria and Yemen and elsewhere. He's been a big risk taker, and that implies that we may see more risk taking.
Daniel, stay with us, and I want to come back to Iran, a very important subject here in the Middle East. But first, let's jump back to that 2030 vision. Let's pull up a couple of points on what is included in that. And Brandon, as Daniel mentioned, this is a lot about oil, about eventually weaning itself off somewhat of oil. Is that a realistic goal? Do you think the kingdom is ready to make maybe the most massive shift a country can, given its history?
I don't think it's ready, but I think the necessity will drive its readiness. I mean, I think they don't have a choice. And there was a Saudi economist who said, look, if we can't do this now, we can never do it, because I think they feel the need and the urgency. And so, you know, this is not the kind of change that happens overnight. But I think they're willing to confront it head on, and that says a lot. You know, they're not running away from the problem. I think they recognize it. They're taking aggressive steps to try to deal with it. I mean, to me, the real question in terms of internal Saudi politics is whether they'll have the support of the religious establishment. And I think that that'll be a big challenge for Mohammed bin Salman.
For them, I imagine change does not come as easily.
Absolutely not. But I think they also realize the threats facing the kingdom, and ultimately, the kingdom or the Al Saud family supports them. And so it's in their interest to cooperate with a change that's going to secure the future of the kingdom.
Daniel, let's jump back to Iran for a moment. That was a very important point because we just saw this Saudi-led alliance against Qatar over its, partly over its support for Iran. As you say, the new crown prince has a strong line, a hard line against Iran. Do you think we're going to see more of that stepping up in the future now?
I think it's likely. I think the Americans are also taking a hard line on Iran, and that will encourage the kingdom to continue in that direction. And they've shown no hesitation about Qatar, and even the Americans have become a little bit frightened of what's happening there. No, I think we're in for some kind of confrontation with Iran, whether it'll be in Syria and Yemen, both places. Precisely what form it will take, I couldn't tell you, but I think things are heating up.
Daniel Surworth, thanks very much for that. And Brandon, briefly, I want to touch on Israel. We've heard already today a reminder of what we've been hearing from Netanyahu and Trump. There's a regional initiative in the works that maybe there will be some kind of normalization under this future Saudi Arabia. Can you envision that happening?
Look, I think to a certain degree, when you think about the kind of cooperation we'd like to see, there's a form of normalization already happening. I think we're a long way off from official normalization, but
in public.
Yeah, I suppose in public, you know, the warm embrace, the sort of the type of thing that we can go in front of the cameras and shout from the rooftops. I think that remains a long way off, because until there's real movement on the Palestinian question, I think we're unlikely to see the Saudis give us a warm embrace. But I think on issues that are really critical to both states, security issues, I think there are things happening, and I think that those things are important, and baby steps forward.